All right, hello. This is my final presentation for Buddhism, Intro to Buddhism, Rels 2336, I believe, or Rels 2301. My topic that I chose for today's presentation is Buddhism and food. I chose this topic purely because it's something that interests me, and food's something I pride myself in, whether it's cooking, eating, or making. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the presentation. So, Buddhism and Food by me, Michael Berman. So, the Buddhist diet, what is it exactly? So, the Buddhist diet is known as lacto-vegetarian, which is obviously very plant-based, but it has there's a handful of exceptions that are allowed. So, as it states right here, in Buddhism, certain things are and are not allowed. One of the very big things that is not allowed at all in Buddhism, however, is meat. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this no meat rule. The main one is when meat is offered to you as a gift, in which case it could be considered okay. However, it is still frowned upon to eat meat. And one of the main reasons for eating meat is it's considered immoral as well as an intoxicant, which we will tap on later in this presentation. So, in the Buddhist diet, another big type of food that is frowned upon is dairy products, and specifically animal milk, because they believe that the animals that need this milk to survive, they believe it's better to be safe for them rather than for them to consume it themselves. However, according to my research, it only applies to certain sects of Buddhism, not necessarily all sets of Buddhism as a whole. However, though, in replacement of these major food groups, many plant alternatives are used in place, and the substitutes most commonly used are soy and tofu in place of meat and dairy products. And one thing that I forgot to mention here was another large thing that is used is supplements, because with this type of a diet, there are certain areas that are deficient, and those vitamins and supplements help make up for those deficits. So certain do's in the Buddhist diet are things like this. These are foods that are allowed, and there's no issues with them in the Buddhist religion. So to quickly go through these, we have yogurt and cottage cheese and milk. We have bread, oatmeal, quinoa, and rice, apples, bananas, berries, as well as peaches and most other fruits like your grapes, your oranges. I believe mango and pineapple were also on my list when I was doing this research. Then we also have vegetables such as broccoli, tomatoes, which is really a fruit, even though it classified a tomato as a vegetable. Green beans and peppers are also allowed, as well as a handful of others, such as, I believe, asparagus and one other, but that I cannot remember right off the top of my head. Starchy vegetables such as potatoes, corn, and peas. Then we also have our legumes, which are our chickpeas, lentils, and most forms of bean, such as black and pinto beans. These are really great for when you're trying to make chili. Another kind of bean that is allowed in this diet is kidney beans, which they get their name from being colored and shaped like an actual human kidney. When it comes to nuts, almonds, pecans, and pistachios are allowed, as well as, I believe, peanuts. And then oils, it's kind of a sparse list with just olive oil, flaxseed oil, and canola oil, which I have experience cooking with olive and canola oil. Wonderful. Flaxseed oil, I don't have too much experience with, but from what I've heard of flaxseed as a whole, it is it's not a fun time for certain areas. So moving on, we have Buddhist diet don'ts. These are it's a smaller list, but it is also a lot more strict. So obviously, big number one right here, meats. This is beef, veal, pork, lamb. So nothing from a cow, nothing from a deer, nothing from a pig or its cousins, and lamb is lamb. No sheep, no nothing. Um, then we go on for other animals such as salmon or well, fish as a whole. So you have your salmon, your herring, cod, tilapia, trout, and tuna. And this whole no meat rule applies to flesh of any animal, um, which includes fish. And however, during Lenten tide with Catholics, which I am one of, we do allow fish for some reason, which I do not entirely remember at this moment. Um, then moving on from there, we have eggs and poultry, which are a no. So eggs, chicken, turkey, duck, quail, pheasant, which all poultry. Egg, it's again the same concept from earlier. Eating any animal to them is wrong, which again we're about to tap on in 1 minute. Then very pungent vegetables and spices such as onions, garlic, scallions, chives, and leeks. And then this one is a no-brainer right here: alcohol, beer, wine, and spirits. It's much like meat; it's considered an intoxicant, and that's a very large. It is just not allowed whatsoever in the religion. So now, when researching this, one might ask themselves, why is the Buddhist diet so strict on certain foods? And to put it in short, it's what we have here. All right. They consider eating the flesh of an animal immoral, and there's a handful of reasons for that. Uh, they believe that a lot of so according to the cycle of samsara, when you're reborn based off your karma, you have multiple different options for what you could be what you could be reborn into. Um, and if you have enough bad karma, oftentimes it would be that of an animal, which is why eating meat is it's just such a bad thing in Buddhism, because you could potentially be committing an act of cannibalism because you could be eating Uncle Joe, who he just had a lot of bad karma. So he got reborn into the cow and you're about to eat him in burger form. It happens. Um, so they believe that the immorality or wrongness stems from the fact that they consider eating an animal to be the same as actually killing it, even if the animal's already dead. Um, there was a fly there. Okay, so the fact they view animals as sentient beings is like people is why most Buddhists are vegetarian, like I just said, because of that cycle of samsara. And if you have enough of that bad karma, you're just going straight to animal town. And as it says here, they see animals as their equals and they respect them. Buddhists are also encouraged to help animals if they are trapped and let them back into nature, as they also believe that holding animals captives are it's just wrong, which is falls in line with it with treating them as equals, and it would be the same as slavery because they view them the same as they view people. So moving on from there, we have our pros of the Buddhist diet. So in previous slides, it's evident, as I've stated in previous slides, it's evident that this is a very plant-based diet with very few exceptions for animal products. But with the few that there are, we have it allows for a very healthy diet. and it allows for you are exposed to a lot more vitamins and nutrients and essential minerals and all of that fun, healthy stuff. So it does come with its benefits as it eliminates a lot of processed and unhealthy foods. And as I've done in a lot of my research in food as a whole and for various different classes, um, processed and unhealthy foods, especially when it comes to fast food, is oftentimes awful for you as it contains a whole bunch of extra preservatives and chemicals and things like that that just aren't great for the body. But moving on from there, what are exactly the pros of this food diet? Why would someone actually want to partake in this kind of diet? So, number one, it's very high in antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, as well as many other essential nutrients, like I just said. Um, Following this plant-based diet is wonderful for weight loss, as I previously said. It eliminates a lot of the processed and unhealthy foods. So a lot of the fat and sugars and things like that just aren't there in the diet. Um, then also according to studies, according in the article that I found this for, studies have shown that following this type of a diet has proven that there is less body fat on a follower of this particular diet, and less body fat leads to much less risk of heart problems and, well, heart disease as a whole, whether it's heart attacks or blockages or various things like that. Because when there's a lot of fat around one's heart, it leads to buildup and blockages and clotting, and it's very tragic and painful for when that does happen to someone. Cons of the Buddhist diet. So, once again, as previously mentioned, this is a plant based diet. So, there will be areas of the diet that will be deficient just by lack of. It's not inclusive to every single food group. So, there one big one is protein and iron deficiencies, um, which this can be supplemented with protein and iron supplements. Um, Lower levels of iron and vitamin B12, which is problematic as it could lead to increased risk for anemia, which is, if I remember correctly, where your blood will not clot. And that is a bad thing because if it's not going to clot, if you get cut, you will just continue to bleed and bleed and bleed, even if it's a very tiny, minute cut. Um, and then possible deficiencies in vitamin D, omega 3s, and zinc. Vitamin lack of vitamin D is a problem as it's essential for bone health as well as calcium and several other things. Omega 3s are lack of omega 3s are also problematic because if you don't have enough omega 3s, I believe it can lead to issues in your brain and development there. Also, they're fatty acids, which are just good for being able to use for storage when you're not able to access as much food. And zinc, which is zinc's just essential for several things. Um, in studies, when people have done studies over this diet, they have seen that caloric intake is give or take the same as other Catholic, not Catholic non-vegetarians. So people who do include and eat everything in their diets. Um, where was that? Oh, yes. So as far as caloric intake, you wouldn't necessarily be having a problem. So, analysis of the Buddhist diet. In conclusion, I personally believe that this is an outstanding diet as there's a psychological and physical feel good aspect. The physical being there's a lot of it. leads to reduced risks of heart problems, which is rampant in my family. And you don't have as much body fat, you look better, you feel better, and you'll be able to do things to the best of your ability just a lot better. And the psychological aspect, as well as looking and feeling better, and that will play a role up here in your brain. Um, Another aspect that would psychologically is you're not eating animals, you're not eating animal products as much. So that does lead to uh, that psychological feel good aspect as you're saving the animals per se. Um, I do believe the pros of this diet outweigh the negatives by a small margin, but if you plan accordingly, you will be able to balance them out and not have as much trouble with this as other people might. Because if you do not plan this well, then you will run into a significant amount of trouble with vitamin and nutrient deficiencies, and some that are rather important, in my opinion. Um, so overall, this was a fun opportunity for me as I was able to explore this part of Buddhism, as I had very little experience with this beforehand. And I would say I found this interesting, and I would in the future try and apply this to myself as well as um, other various portions of my life. And very quickly, I would like to do well, not very quickly, but I would like to compare this to two other religions, as I have a small amount, well, one, I have a fair amount of experience as I am a member of one of those religions, being Catholicism. Um, so this, so this, this particular diet has a couple, well, the one main similarity is the no meat rule, as this is very similar in Catholicism, where during Lenten time they do not allow for meat to be eaten on Fridays. If you're going very hardcore, they do not allow for meat as a whole, well, throughout the whole thing, but they do allow for salmon and herring and these other products minus chicken, turkey, and these more meat-like ones. However, they do allow for fish. And then two other religions that have a interesting diet aspect to it are Judaism, as they do not allow for pork, as they believe those animals to be uh, unkosher or unclean. And then in Islam, Muslims do not allow for their practitioners to eat beef. No, it's Hinduism. It may be as it may be a rule in Islam as well. I don't quite remember just off the top of my head. But in Islam, they do not allow, in Hinduism, I mean, they do not allow for their practitioners to eat beef, as they believe cows to be holy animals. And I believe they do worship their cows. So, one part that I just remembered I really did not tap on that much was another reason for why they are so strict on the no meat rule. And that's because, according to the fifth one of the five moral precepts of Buddhism, they are not allowed to participate in the taking of intoxicants. And that's why beer, wine, and spirits are a very big no-no, as well as other various drugs and things that would cloud your mind. but they believe, in fact, that meat is an intoxicant and that it clouds one's ability to think clearly. And so that's another reason for why they would believe it to be immoral. Um, so another reason that I chose this topic was because uh, during this year, I've had a lot of experimentation of my own with my own diet and things that I do and do not want to do so that I'm able to go where I want to go in my sport. So that and diet is a large part of it. And this diet is one that is very attractive to me. Um, this as a whole was, I know I've said this already, but it was fun for me. And I learned a fair amount that I did not really know before. And I gained a significant amount of knowledge that I will use myself as I try to spread it to others. And one more thing I wanted to talk about here. So, one thing also uh, that applies to the reasoning of the no meat rule in Buddhism is that there's very large Buddhists as a whole, not all of them or not all aspects. I am not speaking for all of them. They are very large animal rights advocates. Let me just bring this back to here. Um, and one thing that they do is they always make sure that they can try and help animals where and when that they can. So if they see an animal captured, they will make sure to try and release it back out into the wild. And one big reason as to why Buddhism is largely a big part of animal rights advocacy is one story from uh, Prince Siddhartha. One of his previous lives, he was out. So, a story from one of his previous lives is what brought him to that previous life, is what led him to be reborn into uh, the life where he brought Buddhism into full existence, into how we know it today. And that story goes along the lines of he was out hunting with his cousins, I believe. And it was a long day. They were having fun, they were chilling. And then when they when they were out hunting, they were about to go home, but they saw this family of, I believe it was tigers, and they were very hungry and ill and meek and had more than likely not eaten in a very, very long time. And so, being the very kind and generous person that he was, he told I believe his brothers to go along and just go on without him. He was going to take care of them. So his brothers said, okay, whatever, we'll go along. Then he tried offering himself up. He stripped down, no clothes, and went and offered himself up to the lions to see if they would eat him. The the tigers, they didn't accept his offer because they're like, okay, that's weird. So he tried once again, and the same thing happened. Did not uh, the Tigers did not accept his offer. So in one last valiant effort, he went up to a cliff, the previous incarnation of uh, Prince Siddhartha. He went up to a cliff, he slit his own neck, and then as he was slitting his neck, he jumped off of the cliff and dying instantly. And then by doing that, the Tigers did finally accept his offering as it was dead meat. So they're like, okay, yum. And so with that, that gave him enough good karma to be reborn into Gautama Buddha, which brought us to where we are today. And to tap onto the cycle of samsara once again, as I've previously mentioned, the amount of good or bad karma depends on where we end up in the cycle and what we are reborn as. And oftentimes, when you have enough bad karma, you go to hell, or you go to the animal realm where you're reborn as an animal. And the only way to move up is when you're given an opportunity to have enough good karma built up. But as oftentimes animals have to kill to make their own food, they oftentimes have trouble in building up good karma. However, there is opportunity. They have to be willing to find it to move up. Like they can get back to the human realm, then they build up their amount of good karma again and get to the next and next and next. So, in conclusion, as far as this diet goes, like I've said already, I believe it to be an outstanding diet and something I will more than likely try myself in the possibly very near future. But for Buddhism as a whole, for what I've learned throughout this class, I am very intrigued and mesmerized as to how much I just simply did not know. And I have to say I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel like I've become a much better person for learning about the new pieces of Buddhism I had no experience with before. And will more than likely do a bit more research on my own after this class to learn more about Buddhism as a whole. Um, this was a I've very much enjoyed doing the discussion boards and seeing various other people's students and classmates of mine, their various opinions on certain subjects from week to week. And I feel like I've also become a much better writer as it's forced me to become a better writer with just getting the reps in and in and in. And overall, this, like I've said time and time again, this was a very fun project. I have severely enjoyed this class. And if you have any more questions, anyone in class, please feel free to message me over this. I would love to talk this over more with you and keep the discussion going, and hopefully we can all learn more about this subject together. Once again, my name is Michael Berme. I chose Buddhism and Food, and this is for REL's 2360 Introduction to Buddhism with Dr. Hyun. I am so sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly.